Hello everybody and welcome to the latest edition of the Founders Playbook, From Lab to Launch. The typical startup advice doesn't work for deep tech founders. You can't just move fast and break things when your product has been developed over a decade of peer-reviewed research. You can't just follow the Silicon Valley playbook when you're navigating intellectual property with a university and trying to find capital for hard tech in a capital-constrained world. So where do you get the real answers? You get them from someone who's actually done it. And our guest today is Peter Tenning, founder of Northern Light Microscopy. He's lived through the entire lab to launch journey, developing his technology, searching for that first believer, and the challenge of turning complex research into product that someone will actually pay for. So today we'll just get the truth about the mistakes made, the lessons learned, and the strategies that have actually worked. So if you're an academic thinking of making that leap, this is the conversation you've been waiting for. Peter, good to see you. How are you?
Very well, thank you. And good to see you as well. Neil, how's things?
Very well, mate. Very well. And you're talking to us today from Scotland?
University of Strathclyde up here in sunny Glasgow.
Sunny Glasgow. Absolutely fantastic. Let's go straight into it. Because the point of this is to create a playbook for other founders by sharing the journey that you've been on, the origin story, the decision to commercialize, those first steps that you took. So let me start with you. Before you were the founder of Northern Light Microscopy, I guess you were a researcher at the university. Was it a Strathclyde?
I've been a Strathclyder since the beginning of my undergraduate in 2009.
And Strathclyde have got a good reputation, actually, haven't they, for the spin-outs and the entrepreneurial support. Thinking about that and what you were researching, what you were thinking about to make into that real-world application, what was that core scientific or technical problem that you were working on?
Yes, I'm an optical physicist by training, but I was ultimately frustrated by how insular it felt. So what I wanted to do was really get in there and try and apply physics in a real world or a useful application. So I did my PhD in optical microscopy, but based in life science labs. Try and find out where their pinch points are and develop either new techniques or apply existing techniques to level up their research. It's always been fundamentally try and figure out what they're doing and learn what they're doing. So even though I was approaching my research background from an engineering or a physics standpoint, I had to do cell culture, I had to work with live animal models, I had to do the blood taking, I had to understand the ins and outs of what it was they were trying to do. Because if I developed a technique or a solution that didn't fit in with their workflows, then they were never going to adopt it. And you don't really understand how that goes until you actually walk in their shoes. And if I can't have a technique or a method that allows them to succeed, then all of that hard work they've done is wasted.
Really walking in their shoes. Yeah, physicists don't tend to take blood, do they?
Not at all. We give blood, sweat, and tears, but we don't usually take it.
Very nice. Very nice. So there you were working with different researchers, you're getting into their shoes, looking at cells, all of that sort of stuff. Was there a single moment where you thought, hold on a minute, there's something here I can do? Or was it like a slow realization? How did you get to the point where you thought this has got the potential to become something bigger?
Yeah, I think more of a slow realization over time and being able to reflect upon different projects and what stuck afterwards. So I think while I was embedded in life science groups, what you found was that these groups, with all the best will in the world, they're not optical physicists, they're not microscopists. They would resort back to technology and methods that has remained unchanged for basically the last 100 years. And that really sparked me the question is, why? We've got all this cool, brilliant, game-changing applications and technologies been developed over the last 30 years. Why is it not being adopted by life science researchers who in principle it should be there for in the first place? And I came to the quite horrifying realization, which is that basically people like me, optical physicists, have been making systems for people like me, optical physicists, for the last 30 years, and not actually for the people who were actually meant to be helping, the people whose research were actually meant to be benefiting. And that was the kickstart from where I wanted to actually make a stepwise change in the approach to the technology that's been made available to them.
Wow. So again, that's what you're saying is you didn't want to be in the lab with the physicists and not get it out. And that sitting in the lab in the silos doesn't work because even if you make some very cool and incredible stuff, other people won't adopt it because you haven't really with them in mind.
Innovation for innovation's sake is impressive, But if it just remains in your lab gathering dust, then what was the point? You may as well have screamed into the void.
So let's just get into it a second, because you talked about microscopy. Imagine for a moment that you're explaining your company to an intelligent investor, but who isn't an expert. In simple terms, what are those major problems, or what is the major problem that you solve?
Optical microscopy has underpinned or played a role in almost every major life science discovery or biomedical development for well over the last 100 years. We've reached a limit, though, to how small we can actually observe these processes on a microscopic scale. When we're looking at viral invasion or pharmaceutical interaction or small molecule uptake, it can make a real difference to the efficacy of the eventual healthcare outcome by what you can see. And whilst there is a bunch of tools that can see beyond what conventional microscopy can see, they've been limited to only the most well-funded or elite institutions and companies because they're too expensive, they're too complicated, and they require too much effort from the end user to actually integrate into their workflows. So what we're actually trying to do is leverage myself and my team's experience in developing advanced microscopy techniques to get these advanced technologies out of the hands of the elites, the GSKs, the AstraZeneca, the Oxfords, and into everyone else's hands. The small biotechs that are just starting up, they're underfunded, resourced universities and companies, and really just democratize bioscience discovery.
Oh, that's really interesting. So let me just get into it a little bit, because I want to understand, how microscopic are we actually talking here?
Is if you've got something like the width of a human hair, it's about 60 micron in width. Typical microscopy, a cell will probably be about a third of that in size, maybe slightly smaller. People can then probe to about, say, a tenth of the hair width, so about 600 nanometers, give or take. What the problem is, we've got a limitation there that you can see cell interactions fairly easily, but you can't see necessarily what's going on inside the cell. So we're able to give with our technology the actual order of magnitude even deeper than what conventional would be, and really see the mechanics and the underlying processes that drive these microscopic cellular interactions.
Right. So you can actually see what's going on inside the cell as it's doing it.
Exactly, yeah. And having that, like you said there, whilst it's doing it is the critical thing. A lot of techniques like electron microscopy, which has been prevalent for about 70 years now, relies on things being dead. So you can see and understand everything that happens in a biological process up until that snapshot, but then you have to extrapolate what was going to happen from there. So actually seeing things in real time gives a real key insight to life science research.
Okay, yeah, because we've all heard of electron microscopes. That's been around for ages. Even I've heard of them. And then you're talking about a couple of really interesting issues there. You were talking about cost, or three actually: cost, complication, and user integration. And none of them are about core technology.
Yeah, we developed was a core technological light engine that we could build around. And that way, when we approached the market and we approached the potential customers and finding out what they were needing, we hadn't have any baked options. We hadn't designed a product already. We were able to respond directly to what the needs of our local collaborators and more global collaborators were actually telling us was necessary from an instrument.
Okay, so it's almost modular, where you've got the core thing, and then when you find out from them, well, what we need it to plug into is this, we'll go, okay, we can do that, but the core module stays the same.
Exactly. We were able to test assumptions, and we hadn't spent all our resources into building something that actually didn't meet anyone's needs.
Yeah, really interesting. So there you are, you're doing some of this work, but translating academic work into a startup is a bit of a step. What was the tipping point? What was the thing that made you think, right, okay, hold on, I'm going to leave what is like relative safety of doing research and academia and working at the university to become an entrepreneur, to think about spinning out, to start a company?
Yeah, so we'd built this base platform. The engagement we'd had with our life science collaborators was great. We were able to take it up to their labs and sit it there, but it still required a bit of tweaking when we'd brought it there. It wasn't ideal. It wasn't sort of out of the box. Me and my co-founder, Ralph, who we developed the technology with, our goal was to try and make as big a difference or as big an impact with our technology as possible. So we approached our TTO office in July 2023. So we got pointed in the direction of one of the Innovate UK ICURe programs. And that was the first exposure I had to commercialization and entrepreneurship. And I think I kind of caught the bug. I spent 3 months traveling around the world, pretty much nonstop, engaging with over 130, 140 different potential customers, spanning life science academics, pharma companies, contract research organizations, government bodies, industry professionals, finding out a little bit more about the microscopy market from a commercial standpoint. So, what our competitors look like, how they operated, what niches they filled, and what our customers or potential customers could need. Some of those people we talked to then are still some of the early adopters that we're engaging with now. First of all, logically, from the evidence that I was able to get from these interviews and engagement, did really seem that me and Ralph had a piece of technology that had legs. It really was meeting market needs, and it could really fill a really important gap out there in biotech research. And emotionally, it was really satisfying to be in the driving seat and actually have the opportunity to take the helm. So actually becoming an expert in our customers and their needs actually positioned me for a really nice trajectory into where I am now, which is terrifyingly leading a small startup.
Oh, there's so much in that. It's lovely. So ICURe, great opportunity. A lot of people have mentioned it actually about going around and, as you said, 140 different stakeholders in the value chain to have those conversations with no product. Now that's interesting. So what you're trying to understand is not, well, they buy something, but it's just, is there a problem?
We were looking to test. We had assumptions about the cost being a problem, the expertise, but we didn't know. I think we started this from our academic background where we understand life science academia very well. But the problems that academics face and the problems companies face and the problems that budgetary holders face are so devoid from each other that we almost need to then basically just wipe the slate clean.
Really interesting. And then you said you brought back evidence that then, as you're talking there, that you could use for prototypes because you've got a sense of that need, you know what it's got to plug into. You also talked about the difference about being a postdoc to doing what you're doing now, and that level of not doing somebody else's stuff, but having that independence to really understand what you're doing.
Yeah, so you said the relative safety of academia. For me, it was going from short-term contract to short-term contract. So another short-term contract didn't really faze me, but it just meant that you're in control. What you put in has a direct reflection of what you get out. It's not that you're relying on your principal investigator or your line manager to try to find grants for you. You are actively here. You've got to build that evidence. You've got to be hungry and go out and find the funding that's going to get you to the next level. I think as you then bring in people underneath you, it gives a whole bunch of different problems as well. So I think I've always seen the PIs that I've worked with very bureaucratic. They spend a lot of time. It's a lot of people management. And why aren't they in the lab doing the fun stuff? And I can tell you what, these days I miss being in the lab and doing the fun stuff. It's amazing how fast that can change in you. But you're in charge of people now. We've got to make this work to support them, to support their jobs, to support their lives. And so I think that being able to go through the ICURe and build this bank of evidence, it gives that confidence to everyone through internally as well. It's like, this is what people said they needed. This is what we've developed. And this is what they're saying now. And it's just been a real whirlwind of change for me for the last year and a bit.
Fantastic. So you've gone out, you've spent a few months going around talking to lots and lots of people. You've come back saying, yes, we've got the thing. You came back. Who was the first person, almost the first follower or the first believer, gave you that validation and said, yeah, okay, maybe you have. Take the risk, go for it.
We've always had a really good relationship with Strathclyde, and especially their TTO and their spin-out office. They were really positive even from the beginning. And when we came back and gave them this bank of evidence from real stakeholders and the market, their response basically was, go for it. There's no point this being held through spin-out for another year. This is something that we need to act on now.
So that support, that university support is really, really important. You've mentioned Ralph a few times. Tell us about him. Come on, give Ralph a shout out.
Yeah, so Ralph Bauer is my co-founder and CTO. I've been very fortunate to know Ralph now for about 7 years. He was a senior lecturer at the University of Strathclyde, specialising in electrical and electronic engineering. And whilst I came from the side of optical microscopy and application, Ralph has always been really interested in miniaturizing optical systems and try to make them more accessible. So whether that's using 3D printed materials, the MEMS micromirrors. And so when we came together to actually work together, it was a really nice complementary skill set we both had. He had the ability to build really fantastic, really robust, miniaturized optical systems. And then I was able to guide it on the application standpoint. And that sort of complementary skill set has continued today. I think that makes us have oversight over both sides of the business, both the commercial and the customers and the technical aspect, which just makes us a really nice duo. And we're luckily still very good friends. So not afraid to tell each other when we've got a bad idea, which I think you need sometimes in this space.
Yeah, absolutely right. Vital. You've got to be able to have that honest relationship and take it from each other and give it to each other, and have that honesty is really important. How'd you find him?
So, being a postdoc, I was coming to the end of one of my numerous short-term contracts. And Ralph was a just newly started academic, had just had his first independent research grant, and it was in this space. I say, luckily, I'd known Ralph for a couple of years beforehand, so we sort of already had a sense of what each other was trying to achieve through our research. And so I met him up and we had over a cup of coffee to discuss what the goals were from Ralph's standpoint and how it would align with what I was looking to do at the time, which was to become a standalone academic in optical microscopy. And so we just went there. The project began in January 2020, which is obviously a brilliant time in the world to begin a lab-based project. But I think that actually having the chance to have some downtime not in the lab and being able to have these more strategic and broader conversations allowed us to develop technology through that project that was actually probably even better than had we just plowed on in.
That's interesting. COVID almost gives you an opportunity because you have to do something different.
Exactly.
Yeah, interesting stuff. Okay, so sticking with the tech for just a little bit longer. It's called hard tech. It's hard, not just because it's physical, but it's also not easy to do. You're talking about seeing the workings of cells inside as they're doing it. And what was the biggest technical hurdles that you had to overcome to prove that this was something that you could make into a viable product and not just something in the lab?
We were in a very fortunate position that we'd really done a lot of validation prior to spinning out with the systems that we had in the lab. Now, moving forward to actually taking that as a product is a completely different beast from creating a base prototype. The team bandwidth is probably one of the hardest things to actually take technology through from paper into that validation into proper product development. And so the first things that we had to do when we spun out was actually build that team. We needed to find the people that had the skill sets that could come and fill the gaps that we had. So upon spinning out, we were able to find engineer Rebecca Craig, who's been a godsend. She'd just finished her PhD in microscopy development, also here at Strathclyde, and we'd had a good working relationship over the last few years. The fact that she was able to take a leap of faith on us, almost, it was a slightly strange interview where almost I was trying to convince her that we were legit rather than the other way around, which was certainly humbling. But bringing in someone that just has that optical photonics skill set to actually help Ralph supplement what we have and just take it to the next level. And then again, whilst we have the ability from a research standpoint to develop a software, it's nowhere near industry standard. So we searched really hard to find a really good software developer. We found a guy called Mark Peters, who, again, if Rebecca was a godsend, then godsend to the power of infinity, Mark was then. Guy that came from no scientific or research background at all, which meant he had no baggage at all. It was brilliant. Things don't necessarily work when you put it together. So it's just been that cycle. And understanding that it's never going to be a linear progress with this.
So that's firstly that whole different skills that you need, technical, non-technical, customer, all of that. How many people have you ended up with so far? That's the first question, I guess.
Yeah, so in the core business, there's 4 of us, and we have a non-executive director, Colin Roberts, who helps support me in the commercial aspects.
So you've already got core team of 4, and you've got a non-exec as well, as you've been building out.
Yep.
And these are people that it sounds like you've spotted.
Rebecca, certainly. The stars aligned with that one, with the timing. For Mark, we actually went out to the open job market and put an application out there. Again, I don't think I anticipated the amount of work that would be required advertising and filling job roles. About midway through the application process, Mark put an application in. We interviewed him that same day. I was so impressed with the CV. And we offered him the job, I think, the next morning after I had time to sleep on it. But it's just been trying to identify the areas that we're missing and then just with limited resources as a startup, try and find out how we can then entice the best people to fill those. And whilst we may not be able to pay things like the largest industry standard wages, there's things that you can do to try and make this more attractive to someone as a opportunity. Obviously, there's a lot of individual responsibility given to Becca and Mark now because as such a small team, everyone has to own everything they're doing. And I think that is recognizing that and making sure that they're aware of that, and that growth can give them is hopefully something that's really valuable.
So everything from networking and knowing people to putting out formal adverts and doing the formal recruitment process. And you've all got to do that when there's a of you.
Exactly, yeah. And then on top of that, once you've got that initial team, their jobs may be engineer or software developer, but that's certainly not all they do in a day. So there's a lot of hats to be worn.
Absolutely. Small company, everybody's doing everything in many different ways. Can I switch over across back to the tech for a second?
Yeah.
Because can we talk about intellectual property? Particularly university spin out. There's all sorts of questions that have got to be thought through about intellectual property. If you're a researcher, you're supposed to publish. You're supposed to tell people what's happening. Or that's what your career is based upon. If you're an investor, that's a very bad idea. So how do you balance that? What was the strategy? What did you use as an approach? And what was the process like of getting all that stuff sorted out?
It's a very difficult line to balance. I think if we'd actually engaged with the TTO office from an earlier standpoint, we would have been able to craft an IP strategy that would have balanced the needs from academic publishing and the commercial spin out in a little bit more of a sensible way. We had luckily made a lot of iterations in our core technology, which made it far enough away from the original published results that myself and Ralph had done just after COVID. So we were still in a position to go through patenting. I think making sure if you're looking to spin out that you do a lot of research internally with other people that have spun out, that you can get a sense of what the deal structure looks like. We also had a solicitor that acted on our behalf through our negotiations that had done a lot of spin outs. So they were able to already just say, point at the original document and be like, that's not standard. They'll move on this. They'll move on this. Don't bother with that. That's not worth the fight. And then just approach it from a pragmatic standpoint.
So you've been through negotiating the IP, you've been through ICURe, you've spoken to a lot of people, you've got a sense of validating the problem, you've gone back, you've spoken to Ralph, we've gone, right, we're going to build something. At that point, you're building something and you're still, as you can hear from everything you've been saying over the last wee while, very focused on what's happening in the customer space, what's happening in the world, that's influencing you. So who's the first people outside of the university that you then went and pitched this idea to?
Yes, I think the person that's probably been the biggest supporter for us, the biggest cheerleader for our technology, has been the Medicines Discovery Catapult out at Alderley Edge. I went and met the lead scientist of their imaging arm there during the ICURe, and one of the quotes he said was, if you're able to get this working, this is going to be some of the best technology that I could see coming into our labs. And so holding on to that relationship was really important for us, because if you've got these cheerleaders, you've got these people that are excited about this technology, you don't want to lose them. So making sure that we're keeping constant engagement with the Medicine Discovery Catapult, being able to form these partnerships with people and almost try and do tech development in collaboration. But I certainly don't think I'd have as much confidence in our go-to-market as if Phil from the Medicines Discovery hadn't been such a constant cheerleader and constant supporter for us.
So there's a collaborative approach there that's really interesting, even working with the customers and co-developing. So how do you actually get that funded? Because it's not cheap and it's not easy. Is it research grants? Is it external funding? Is it angels or VCs? How do you get that done?
Honestly, it's the biggest nightmare of doing anything. You have the best idea with the best customer feedback and the best team, but if you ain't got the cash, then it's not going to go very far. After we went through the ICURe, we were able to secure about £110,000 in commercialization research funding that supported direct commercial activities, both from a customer engagement and a product development standpoint, which really went a long way. The ICURe at the time was, if you'd went through the Explore and you got the thumbs up, you could go into the Exploit, which then allowed you to apply for £300,000 of 100% funding grant support. And we were very, very lucky to secure one of the last rounds of the £300,000 ICURe Exploit funding from Innovate UK. And that got us out the door, basically. We were then able to sign spin-out agreements. Me and Ralph put together some founders funds to supplement that. I think having that buy-in from both of us is really important. Also, because when we incorporate the company, we have to pay for our shares. So we have to buy in anyway. But going forward, I think having some skin in the game comes across well as well. And it makes it real. Strathclyde, and I guess it goes again to show the sort of support we were able to get from them. They were able to put together a 0% interest convertible loan note that supplemented that £300,000 Innovate UK grant, which gave us in total 18 months of runway, which has been fantastic for us.
That's really good, guys. But you're pulling all these different things, your own money, Innovate UK's money, convertible loan note, just to build up enough cash to give you enough runway. It's not easy. It's not one. It's also not single source. It's from here and there.
Yeah, I think it has to. The terms that you're going to get just coming out the door from university are going to be pretty cutthroat. There's no way around that. The risk profile for them as an investor is going to be massive. So I think you've got to be a bit scrappy. There is pots of money out there. You've just got to look. There's competitions. There's these grant funding. Whether you've got local commercialization entities that can do support, there's money out there. It's not easy to get. It is a lot of work to go out there and chase. But if you don't do it, then you're not going to be able to get very far.
At this point, with that 18 months runway, and you've got that funding, and you've done that scrapping, which is absolutely vital. It's a sharp-elbowed process. Where are you moving to now in terms of funding, and how are you going to bridge those gaps? Because there comes a point when the grants aren't going to keep you there because you're now becoming commercial. And you've either got to fund yourself by selling things, or you've got to find some investment that's commercial. So how are you going to bridge those gaps, and how is that working?
Yeah, for our space, we come under usually about a capital equipment grant. So the sales cycles for us are long, and that has to be managed. So right now we have opened we're calling it a pre-seed round of £850,000, and we're having significant investor engagement. These conversations, though, are a lot easier due to the de-risking that we've been able to do so far, making use of this non-dilutive funding. So it's never going to be, fundraising is never an easy thing. It is hard work. You have to make a lot of conversations, a lot of introductions, and you have to take a lot of knockbacks. But doing that groundwork, putting those foundations in place and showing that you've been able to grow commercially through that period really gives people confidence. I remember I spoke to a lot of the traditional Scottish angel syndicates prior to spinning out. And I tell you what, some of the stuff I was probably saying to them at the time made no commercial sense at all. The business plan was all over the shop. The forecasting was pie in the sky. It made no sense. But I wasn't asking for them for money at the time, so it didn't matter. When I'm speaking to them now, they've been able to see the growth of Journey from a wide-eyed optimist into someone that's maybe slightly more commercially astute. We think we're at a pivotal moment now where actually resources now will give us the ability to, by May next year, have everything in place and actually try to generate some revenue, actually putting our money where our mouth is.
So you've got to do a lot of thinking very much in advance. So you've got to think, well, hold on, we need 6 months with the money to do that. It's going to take us 6 months, 9 months to get that money together. So the moment you're talking about 18 months of runway, well, hold on a minute. That means 3 months in, you got to start thinking about the next raise.
Yeah. God, I wish I'd been so forward thinking at the time back in 3 months in. And having people's salaries that you're responsible for really clarifies that as well. Because it's not just a case of we gave it a punt and it doesn't work. There's a whole bunch of people behind me that are putting in a bloody lot of hard work and really giving it their all to try and make this a success that they need to be made secure as well. And so a lot of forward planning, a lot of strategic planning.
Yeah, those responsibilities for the team, it really does, as you say, clarify and it focuses your mind, right? And there's when you've got people that are depending on you and they've got rent to pay and they've got families to support, that's all of a sudden, no, this is more than just an idea.
Yeah, and I think but the responsibility goes everywhere, doesn't it? Then when I ask someone to do something or need something done, if you can put it in the context of the greater mission or the greater North Star, then I think that becomes easier for everyone to work towards.
As we've said, looking for the funding is hard. Making sure that you're supporting your employees is hard. Some of those conversations you've just said can be hard. It's a tough old process and it's a big learning journey and it's a big growth journey, I think you've already said as well. So how do you find that whole process and how do you deal with the knockbacks? Because you mentioned knockbacks as well on the funding journey.
Coming from academia, luckily knockbacks are something that we're very familiar with, whether that's jobs or publications, grant funding. Knockbacks are something that you sort of just have to take on the chin. I think just understanding that a lot of the time it's not personal. These investors, they've also got KPIs. They've also got people they have to answer to. They've also got risk profiles, theses that they have to adhere to. And so it's not always going to be just the case that someone doesn't like your idea and they don't think it has to succeed. Sometimes that might be the case, but that might be the case because you've not provided the evidence that they need. You then need to reflect in on and go, all right, they said they don't think that this is investable because of X. let me go back to the business plan, the plans, the strategic documents, and figure out if I'm actually communicating this in the best way possible. Always ask for a response, always ask for feedback. You might not always get it, but I think the good ones will try and give it to you where possible. But then by having also a non-executive director, Colin Roberts, that comes along with me in this fundraising process, he's got that, it's not 100% outside objective point of view, but it's certainly a non-expert. He's not as emotionally attached to the idea as we are, to give you that sort of sense check as well as that's just an investor's excuse. That's something that says they've not got the time, they've not got the money, they're not interested, or that's actually a good point that they made. And we should actually untangle that and then actually think about how we can solve this going forward.
Interesting. So there's everything from understanding the knockbacks you're getting and understanding your role in it, because actually it takes two to tango, but you've got a big influence in either whether you're going to get knockback or not, and whether you're going to learn from that, and whether you're going to then go back and get a positive result afterwards. Coming back then to the customer side as we finish off, because you've talked about customers a lot. You've talked about having collaborative relationships with them. How did you end up getting to talk to those customers? How do you manage to get in the door and have those conversations?
I've been operating in this space for about 8-9 years now. So I've been able to build up a fairly decent network across both industry and academia in bioscience research. And so leveraging a lot of the networks that you have can be a real game changer to actually then get in those initial conversations. Another way that we went and approached it was you've got to make sure you're speaking to the right people. LinkedIn Sales Navigator for us was a real game changer, being able to actually identify who are the people that, you've got to assess who do you want to speak to first. Do we want to speak to someone that's a budgetary controller first? Maybe not. Maybe we want to actually speak to the lab manager who manages a team of people where microscopy is playing a big role in their area. So we need to identify who those people are. Don't be afraid of competitors. Because we came in from the academic standpoint, I know a lot of the competitors in this space. I know the business development managers really well. They're happy to do an introduction if they think that your technology might be something that customer needs, because it reflects well upon them as well. So don't be scared of engaging with the people operating in the same space as you. These are people that can support you going forward. And if they're really excited about what you're doing, they could even become one of your business development managers in the future. I actually have found that putting myself into the same location as these people and then making that clear that I'm already there opened up to be a little bit more flexible. When I was going through the ICURe and I was over in Boston or DC or New York, just saying to someone, look, I've came over from Scotland. I'm in Boston for this week. I'd really like to test some of the things we're looking to develop with you. Have you got any time at all? And it might not be through office hours, it might be grabbing a coffee at lunch or a beer in the evening. But people tend to make that a little bit more effort, I think, if you can demonstrate that you've also made that effort.
Yeah, I think that's right. We've experienced that, where you go to a different place and all of a sudden you say, I'm here for a week, and then they will make the effort to meet you.
Yeah.
It makes a big difference. Completely agree. Networks, you mentioned, really interesting. LinkedIn Sales Navigator, great little tool, well worth using. So you've gone out there, you've spoken to those customers, you've made that collaborative approach, you're doing all of that. What's the next big thing for you guys? Where's the next big milestone?
Yeah. So just over the summer, we had a trade show where we actually released the system more widely to the market. That was great for us because it allowed for a lot of testing, a lot of firsts. So now we know it can travel in a car, which was a great first. We know that it can be operated in a trade show environment, which is completely outside of its standard operating environment, which is great as well. But we are in a stage now that we can actually begin getting UKCA, CE marking, begin actually getting these out and deployed with the first 12 early adopter potential customers that we've engaged with, and we've got things scheduled over the next 3 months, and really try to understand how we can convert that into some early revenue. But really, alongside this, it's sort of trying to get that funding through the door. I think that we've got a stage now where we're on the cusp of being ready to full market release, and we just need that little bit of push, a little bit of extra bandwidth to get there.
So back to 2020. Thinking back to 2020. So now you're ready to put something on the market. You're looking for that bit of cash to get you out there. 5 years ago, when you walked in, or you were trying to walk in the lab, and then all of a sudden you couldn't because it was 2020. Over those 5 years, is there anything you'd go back and change a decision, make a different decision if you could?
One of the things I would tell myself is that don't be scared to sell things early. I think as an academic or from a research background, I was almost looking to wait till it was perfect before I was like actually try to engage people through a sales process.
Mhm.
But there's nothing stopping you. You don't need permission to try and sell something. You just need to then put into the context of what you're able to deliver upon the timelines that you're able to deliver. I think maybe looking at approaching every engagement a little bit more with a commercial mindset would have been more beneficial. But to be honest, I don't think I would have had that skill set back then, even if I'd wanted to. So it's understanding that there's a growth that needs to happen that can't really be rushed.
Nice, really nice. And yeah, of course, there's growth. There's massive growth as you go through this journey. So it's like, well, if I could have done that earlier, that would have been great. But actually, I couldn't have done that earlier because I didn't know what I was doing
Yeah.
compared to now. So yeah, nice. So thinking then about, look, most of the stuff that we hear, most of the stuff that we learn about entrepreneurship as a process, as a system, as a profession, it tends to come out of the United States. The Americans done an incredible job, mainly on the West Coast, of developing this playbook for how to grow a business. Is there anything that you've learned or come across that's been different to that? Anything that's maybe counterintuitive or surprising?
God, I mean, if you try and take anything from the US and apply it over here, it's almost bound to fail. There's a level of funding, risk appetite, and a can-do attitude that exists over there that I just don't think exists within the British culture. You've got to sort of carve your own path a little bit. By surrounding yourselves with a bunch of experienced people that have went through similar processes here or within local markets is the best thing you can do and learn from them. But understanding that this is going to be a growth through experience rather than necessarily looking at a playbook. Because I think, as you said at the top of this, there isn't really a playbook. Even within the Royal Academy of Engineering Enterprise Fellowship cohort, the different companies, the different areas we all operate in, the challenges we all face are numerous. But the peer support and the peer learning for the core company and the core entrepreneurial values are something that can be shared across us. So making sure that you surround yourself within the ecosystem of entrepreneurship, within deep tech marketing or life science applications, and other people that are there, I think is just critical for growth and success.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. And also because we do a lot more hard tech over here, a lot more deep tech over here. You can't turn something around in half an hour.
No.
And you've got to have those people around you to help you through it.
I think if you told someone that you walked up to an investor with a piece of paper with a drawing on it and said, invest in this, you wouldn't get laughed out the room. You'd get escorted out the room.
Yeah, I think that's true. I think that's absolutely true. Is there anything that you've used over the last 5 years, a tool, a book, a process or something that you would say to another academic founder that's thinking about this, this is a really useful thing that you could use?
Peer support, peer networking is, I think, the foundation of information or sharing and learning and inspiration as well. Seeing the work that other people put in, understanding the journey that you're about to embark on, and not necessarily being scared of it, but being aware of what it can take is only something that you can learn either through your own experience or through the experience of others.
Find your people.
Yeah.
Okay, so look, here we are. You're at a critical stage, obviously. You're about to make a product that people can buy. You're going to raise a significant amount of cash to make it happen. For whoever's listening to us in our audience right now, for investors, for maybe employees, for partners, for anybody that might be listening to this, what is your biggest challenge that our audience could help you with?
If you've got any input or any connection into life science, biotech, pharma industry, you know anyone that knows anything about running labs or setting up labs. If you've got anyone that's got a problem, if you're a new startup that's needing to actually obtain equipment for the first time, let's have a chat. I want to basically see now about where our systems can offer the most value, where they don't offer the most value. And I think that's really critical to discern now as a go-to-market strategy, and testing, because I think that we think we've got a great piece of tech. The people that we've engaged with think we've got a great piece of tech, but we need to expand this wider. And so, if you're an investor, we'll get in touch because I'll always have a conversation if there's money on the table. If you're a potential customer, get in touch because I'll always have a conversation if there's potentially money on the table. And if your employees, I suppose, and get back to work, stop listening to the podcast.
You've only got to hold on for another few minutes.
Yeah. Okay.
Stay there. Don't go away yet. Imagine, just show them that you're stirring your tea. Okay, so then, given all that, where can our listeners go to follow your journey and learn more about Northern Light Microscopy?
Yeah, so if you want to get in touch, please just find me on LinkedIn. My name's Peter Tinning. I'm easily found there. Our LinkedIn for the company is Northern Light Microscopy. We can be found on our website at www.northernlightmicroscopy.com. And if you want to get in touch with me, then it's peter@northernlightmicroscopy.com. Feel free to reach out. I'm always happy to take any introductions, any requests at all, and just happy to have a chat.
Fantastic. And all of those contact details, of course, are in the show notes. So have a look and get in touch with Peter. Peter, fantastic. Thank you so much for joining me today. Absolutely lovely conversation and really good to see you, mate. So thank you very much indeed for coming on.
No, thanks for having me. Honestly, it's been an absolute pleasure. Cheers, Neil.
Nice one. Cheers, Peter.